Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is calling for greater unity to combat the murderous terrorism of extremist Islam. He made the call after the Islamic State claimed responsibility for the recent wave of grisly killings that claimed the lives of more than 200 victims in one day. The French manager of an American-based chemical company was beheaded in France. 39 Western tourists were shot to death on a Tunisian beach. 27 were killed and more than 200 others wounded in a Shiite mosque in Kuwait. And at least 146 civilians were murdered in northern Syria. The Israeli leader said the vast scale of death is proof that the world is locked in a struggle against dark forces.
And that threat only continues to spiral. The barbaric attacks were inspired by ISIS' chilling call to its worldwide followers to make ongoing celebration of the Muslim month of Ramadan a calamity for non-believers. The murderous Sunni organization promised that the Islamic holiday will have lots of surprises as part of commemoration for the first anniversary of its declaring a caliphate in the Middle East. Islamic State spokesman Abu Muhammad al-Adnani demanded Westerners be targeted and promised that Islamist martyrs who kill infidels, Christians, Jews, and members of other faiths would receive a tenfold reward in paradise.
Fox News is reporting that Jordan has become a safe haven for Christians fleeing the cauldron that has become the Muslim Middle East. But even though members of the tiny persecuted Christian communities of Iraq and Syria are among over 750,000 refugees now living in the Hashemite kingdom, they are forbidden to leave miserable conditions in the tent cities where they now live. Journalists also say support for radical Islam is apparent in the Jordanian street. They've been recording the haunting testimony from those who survived toxic chemical attacks in Syria by government troops, as well as torture cells operated by the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. ISIS continues to drive Christians from their villages, forcing them to convert or face painful death. Only Israel stands out in the brutal region as the one nation offering Christians the opportunity to live in their own homes as full citizens where they can openly practice their faith protected by law.
Security forces in Israel are also on high alert during Muslim observance of Ramadan, which has been accompanied by a significant rise in violent attacks over recent years. 25-year-old Malachi Moshe Rosenfeld was killed in an ambush by two Palestinian assailants who opened fire on his vehicle in the Sumerian town of Shfut Rachel. 3 others in a car also suffered moderate wounds. Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon accused Hamas of being behind this attack, as well as last week's murder of 25-year-old hiker Danny Gonen, he says were funded by Iran. In other terror attacks, soldiers shot and killed a Palestinian gunman who opened fire at them in Judea and Samaria, and a 20-year-old female IDF soldier was seriously wounded when she was stabbed in the neck by a Palestinian woman near the tomb of the biblical matriarch Rachel between Jerusalem and Bethlehem. There were 4 terror attacks within 4 days and 6 within the first 10 days of Ramadan.
The Hamas terrorist rulers of Gaza are boasting the construction of a new 3.5-kilometer tunnel, which they claim penetrates Israeli territory. During a tour of the underground network given to Iranian television, Palestinian operatives said the passageway was built after the end of last summer's fighting with Israel. IDF soldiers devoted much of the 50-day conflict to detecting and destroying the subterranean passages that were designed for Arab infiltrators to carry out terrorist attacks in the Jewish homeland. The Israeli army has begun to deploy new high-tech systems to help locate the tunnels.
Palestinian Authority Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki has officially filed a claim at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, charging that Israel is guilty of war crimes for responding to rocket fire from Gaza last year. The alleged evidence is based on information supplied by Ramallah's own Commission of Inquiry and pro-Palestinian non-governmental organizations. The PA also submitted dossiers against the building of homes for Jewish residents in the biblical heartland of Judea and Samaria.
The latest attempt to breach the naval blockade of Gaza was foiled when IDF special forces boarded the lead ship of the so-called Freedom Flotilla. 3 smaller vessels reversed course after the pre-dawn raid on the Swedish flagship Marianne, about 100 nautical miles off the shores of the Hamas-run enclave. The vessel was then towed to the Ashdod port. Arab-Israeli Knesset member Basel Ratas of the Joint Arab List was among about 20 other participants aboard who maintained they were on a humanitarian mission. Prime Minister Netanyahu disputed that claim, saying that because Israel permits over 800 delivery trucks into Gaza each day, there's simply no need for small ships such as these to bring non-contraband to the Strip. Netanyahu said if someone wants to donate aid, it can be sent through land crossings where it is checked to prevent the transfer of weapons. He also called the activists hypocrites for protesting against the only democracy in the Middle East instead of sailing to Syria, where up to 320,000 people have been killed and as many as 5 million banished from their homes.
Government officials in Jerusalem are expressing shock that the Vatican would sign the first treaty with the State of Palestine. Foreign ministry officials criticized the move as a hasty step that damages the prospects for advancing negotiations for a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians, and said that it harms the rights of the Jewish people. Other sources say that the move could also have implications on future diplomatic relations between Jerusalem and the Vatican.
President Barack Obama signed a trade bill fast-tracked through both houses of Congress that includes provisions opposing the Palestinian-led boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign against Israel. The measure pertains to free trade talks between the U.S. and the European Union, and it requires American negotiators to consider BDS rejection as a principal objective when conducting all transatlantic business. Sponsors say the bill is aimed at leveraging the incentive of strengthening trade ties with the United States as a means to discourage European participation in anti-Israel economic activity.
Despite marathon negotiations in Vienna, world powers were unable to finalize a nuclear deal with Iran by the June 30th deadline. Even though an American official announced that agreement has been reached over inspection of military sites in the Islamic Republic on a case-by-case basis, the talks have been extended to bridge significant remaining gaps. The outstanding disputes include the sequencing of lifting economic sanctions against Tehran and the nature of monitoring mechanisms to ensure that it won't violate any final pact. If a deal is reached before July 9th, Congress will have 30 days to review it before President Obama is permitted to suspend American sanctions against Iran. A postponement beyond that date, however, would double the congressional review period to 60 days, giving opponents on all sides more time to work on undermining a deal.
7 decades after the Holocaust, the global Jewish community is finally nearing the size it was before the devastating murders of 6 million members. There were 16.6 million Jews around the world prior to the Second World War. According to the Jewish People Policy Institute, the community now numbers 14.2 million. And if various subgroups are also counted, such as children with only one Jewish parent, then that number approaches 16 million. Israel is home to the largest Jewish community with a population of 6,103,200 souls. The United States follows with the second highest Jewish population of 5,700,000. According to the JPPI report, the last decade witnessed an 8% increase in Jewish growth, which is the largest since the Holocaust.
And there's great news for the world's oceans. Israeli scientists have developed a system to reduce response time to oil spills to just 20 minutes. The Harbo Technology startup created a 100-foot prototype of a floating barrier that is capable of containing up to 2 tons of crude oil without leaking. It works by encircling and encapsulating, then lifting and removing the oil out of the water. Until now, existing technology was so bulky that it typically took at least 10 hours to respond to a crisis. by which time the oil spread too far and too deep to be effectively contained, with disastrous consequences for marine life and the environment. Harbo has already been approved to provide oil spill solutions in several areas of the United States. That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in another beautiful day on our rooftop studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Eli Rosenfeld. He's the chairman of the French Hill and Mount Scopus Community Center in Jerusalem. Eli, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Josh.
Eli, you live in the Jerusalem neighborhood of French Hill, which borders on several Arab communities and neighborhoods within Jerusalem.
Yes.
Tell us about what is the situation on the ground right now?
Well, the situation on the ground is very tense. The security situation is complex because there are terror attacks and violent behavior towards the Jewish and the Israeli neighborhoods from the Arab neighborhoods that are surrounding them. But on the other hand, sometimes we communicate together and we cooperate together. For example, there is a plan to build a waste plant in the middle of the valley between the two neighborhoods. So we talk to the other side and we try to communicate together against that plan. But basically it's a very, very tense situation and we try not to mix together.
Now also on the border of French Hill is something called a Shuafat, which is a refugee camp. Yet I was there recently and it looks like a metropolis city. Why are they calling that a refugee camp with all those buildings and new skyscrapers?
The refugee camp is a name from the past. Today it's a big neighborhood with a lot of tall buildings, and it's a Jerusalem. It's a neighborhood inside the city of Jerusalem. People don't understand that the Palestinian people over there, the Arab people over there, they are citizens, they are residents of Jerusalem. And because they are residents of Jerusalem, they have the freedom to travel into Jerusalem and into the state of Israel. They can go to Tel Aviv, they can go to everywhere else. Basically it's a big and a very populated neighborhood inside the city of Jerusalem.
Well, Shuafat, which they call a refugee camp, and Isawiya, which is a neighborhood in Jerusalem, both of them have tremendous amount of illegal building. I mean, they're building constantly and illegally without the permits of the city of Jerusalem. How is it allowed to continue?
Well, Josh, you must understand there is no such thing as the rule of law in those neighborhoods. The police is not getting in the neighborhoods. Nobody can do anything about the illegal building over there. And what developed over the years, that if you have the force and you have the muscle, like they say, and you have the money, you can build and you can do whatever you want in those neighborhoods, and nobody can enforce the law over there. If I try to build something in my neighborhood, I need to get permits from the city of Jerusalem, but they don't have permits, they don't need anything, they just go and build it.
So why are the people of Jerusalem not demanding that they have the same law for the Jewish citizens that they have for Arab citizens? It seems like Arab citizens in Jerusalem get preferential treatment.
We are demanding it, but we are also realistic. We know that the political situation and the security situation on the ground is very complex. I can demand it, but I really don't think that we can enforce the law in those neighborhoods without a strong hand and a decision from people in the higher places.
You know, there was a security situation where there were attacks actually being planned and perpetrated in French Hill from Isawiya. Yet you guys have incredible, you know, there's just one road going into both neighborhoods and everyone has free access. The residents of French Hill wanted to close that road, yet the government said no. Why?
The government said no because there is a policy that Jerusalem is together. Jerusalem is one city, and if Jerusalem is one city, so the Jewish neighborhoods and the Arab neighborhoods should live together. They are neighbors, and there are no borders between neighbors. We always say, okay, if this is the situation, let's live together, but demand taxes from them, put security forces on the ground, treat them as you treat us from all aspects. If we have something, they should have it too, but if there are laws that apply on us, they should apply on them also.
Also, the EU and the UN, who are trying to say that they are, not biased, they're actually supporting this illegal building. I understand in some cases there was reporting in the news recently, they're actually funding the building illegally in Jerusalem. Why is it important for them to do something that would be illegal in Israel?
The answer to this question is that there is a kind of an arms race in Jerusalem, but not with arms, with buildings. Everybody rushes to put facts on the ground. Everybody builds high and builds everybody is building a lot of buildings in order to determine some kind of a status quo in the situation. And the EU, unfortunately, is involved in it. I don't know if the EU funds a lot of houses, but we see in Issawiya, for example, something new. A lot of houses just put the sign of the EU on the side of the house. They know that they will get immunity and nobody will touch that house, nobody will demolish that house. It's a kind of a free pass to build whatever you want.
Ellie, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
My message to your viewing audience is come to Jerusalem. It's a beautiful city. You must understand that Jerusalem is the spiritual center of the world. It's a complex city. It's not an easy place to live in, but we live here and we want to continue and flourish in this place.
Thank you, Ellie, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, shining light from Israel.
What drives someone to become a religious extremist, even to the point of becoming a suicide bomber? Like most people, I assumed that there were two overriding answers: poverty and ignorance. The poverty line goes like this: grinding poverty from which there appears to be no escape fosters seething resentment against those who have more. If your choice is to die a martyr or die a beggar, martyrdom is the clear winner. The ignorance lines goes like this: the poor have no chance to get a decent education and thus are susceptible to easy manipulation. Clever people play on their prejudices and superstitions. Once the extremist gets this ignorant, poor person in his grasp, indoctrination is easy. Since there's plenty of poverty and plenty of ignorance around the world, that's a lot of people to draw from. This is how the source of terrorism is explained. Then I went to Pakistan and actually lived in the world from which extremists recruit, and I found something much different than I expected. Poverty had little to do with who became an extremist, lack of education even less. Many of those that I met who subscribe to religious extremism and are prepared to murder and die for their cause are from the middle class, and many had a university education. These are not poor people, and these are not uneducated people. They are well-fed and well-read. So if poverty and ignorance don't drive people to extremism, what does? One is a desire for meaning and for order. Places like Pakistan are submerged in chaos and corruption. Islamists promise clear-cut solutions to every problem. Here's how things will change if you follow these rules, and only these rules. Another is a desire for change. The old corrupt order, the narrative goes, must be overthrown, and that can only happen through violent action. Again, it is Islamists that step in with a promise to create a new form of government. Then throw in a strong sense of victimhood. We are not responsible for the sorry state of our country. Others have brought us down, and you have a toxic brew that many willingly imbibe. These, of course, are the same easy answers that tyrants and demagogues, from Lenin to Mussolini to Hitler to bin Laden, have always offered their followers. I saw this played out one day while living in Pakistan. After one of the many assassinations of a major figure there, I was sitting with two middle-class parents. The father owned a small business, and the mother was a nurse. They had given their son a good life. He wanted for nothing. They told me that during dinner with the family a few days earlier, their son noted how the person who was murdered deserved to die. Why? Because he had spoken out on behalf of religious minorities. They were shocked. How could their son, who'd been educated and well-raised think that. This story is all too typical. So what to do about this extremism? The first step is to get off this false narrative that this is first and foremost a poverty or education issue. The second is to take on the narrative of the extremist groups. They promise a better way, but what in fact do they deliver? The answer is always more death, more suffering, and more poverty. In other words, young people need to see these extremist groups for what they are. Only then will recruitment numbers begin to go down. Third, the media have to stop treating extremists as freedom fighters, a narrative that is all too common in places like Pakistan. Fourth, teachers and parents cannot assume that just because they reject religious extremism, their children and students will too. Middle-class parents and teachers have to be vigilant in instilling moderate, pluralist values in their children. Fifth, politicians have to stop blaming their country's problems on the West and have to confront the endemic corruption that destroys countries like Pakistan from within. Sixth, and probably most important, Islamic religious figures have to stop looking the other way, or worse, glorifying so-called martyrs, Muslims who murder innocent people. Almost always other Muslims in the name of Islam. Muslim religious leaders must promise these murderers eternal damnation, not some sort of twisted heavenly bliss. The people of Pakistan and other Muslim-majority countries have real grievances, but extremism only makes things worse, always and everywhere. It's not poverty and misery that creates religious extremism, it is religious extremism that creates poverty and misery, and death. I'm Haroon Ullah, adjunct professor at the Georgetown University School of Foreign Service for Prager University.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
In 1980, the Israeli parliament passed a law declaring a united Jerusalem as the eternal capital of the State of Israel. Threatened by the Arab League with an oil embargo, national embassies in Jerusalem closed their doors. That same year, Christians from around the world gathered in Jerusalem to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. Sensing the isolation of the Israeli people, the participants and leaders of this gathering decided to establish the International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem.
The International Christian Embassy Jerusalem is since more than 30 years right here in Jerusalem to connect the global church with the nation of Israel. For many Jewish people throughout the centuries, the only face of Christianity, what they experienced, was the ugly face of anti-Semitism, of Christians persecuting the Jewish people wherever they found them. As Christian Embassy, we are here in Israel to show a new face of the church, a new face of Jesus Christ to the Jewish people. We are here to affirm to Israel and to the nation that God is a covenant-keeping God, that God is a God who didn't abandon His people, but that He is faithful to every single promise which He has made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
What an amazing thought, that when everyone was abandoning Israel, Christians stepped in and said, we will stand with Israel and we will have an embassy in Jerusalem.
Already for more than 30 years, the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem is reaching out all over the land, from the north to the south, from the east to the west, to reach those people that are in need. And these people are, of course, the Jewish people who live in this land. But we've also been reaching out to the Christian Arab, to the Muslims, to the Bedouin, and to the Druze that are part of the population of Israel.
Our vision is to build relationships, to foster reconciliation, and to reach out with God's love by responding to the social needs that come across our desk every single day. Through the projects that we do, we hope to provide a better future for the people of Israel and to reach out with hope to those who need it most.
With representation in more than 80 countries around the globe, the ICEJ is actively working to be the connection of the Christian church worldwide to Israel.
To say that we want to reach every country in the world, it's not just a saying, it's a mandate from God that we are to reach into every nation of the world, find those willing to represent their nation and stand with Israel in these days. It's prophetic, it's significant, and it's absolutely world-changing.
Through our publications, TV programs, digital media platforms, and annual events such as the celebration of the Feast of Tabernacles, we are providing resources and opportunity for the church to connect and engage in being an active part of what God is doing today in the nation of Israel.
You know, the truth is, the work of the ICJ is more important now than it's ever been. With Israel at the eye of the Middle East storm, we must stand with Israel. And we must stand with the Jewish people to see God move in our generation right here in the land.
It's so important to educate the church regarding Israel from the Word of God and in the Bible. There's a lot of theory among the Christians speaking about Israel and a lot of opinions, but we do have to go to the Word of God with the revelation of the Holy Spirit actually, so the church can really understand that without the Jewish people and without Israel, there wouldn't be any church, there wouldn't be any Bible, there wouldn't be any salvation.
I want to personally invite you to find out more how you can connect yourself or your church with the nation of Israel. I look forward to hearing from you.
To learn more about how you can connect with what God is doing today in Israel, visit our website at www.icej.org.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.